There's a lot of rhetoric around South-South cooperation, particularly, for example, countries Brazil, India, South Africa, at the national level, proponents therein claiming that this is a very different model from North-South cooperation. I try to avoid the national level rhetoric and really hit the ground, looking at how South-South cooperation translates at the city level, and in particular looking at the perspective of urban professionals, municipal professionals and practitioners in planning, who are engaged with international development projects, to understand how they value and how they see different types of international development cooperation, including South-South cooperation. So, for example, in Mozambique, and in particular in the capital city of Maputo, I've spoken a lot with different municipal professionals engaged in the sanitation sector and various forms of international cooperation projects. In Argentina and in Brazil, I've also spoken or have a research project with water utilities who are engaged in South-South cooperation between within countries and between the region or within the region. And basically the idea there is that there is something different. We don't quite know what it is, but my work tries to examine that difference from the perspective of local practitioners on the ground. What I think is very interesting is that we've had an explosion of different urban networks that are promoting South-South cooperation. You know, for a long time now, we've had civil society organizations that have worked across regions internationally, within countries, to build proximate peer relationships, to support different objectives of those proximate peers. But what we've seen more recently is an explosion of proximate peer relationships within different sector fields, so i.e. Water and sanitation. Again, my own interests, we've seen water utilities getting together either through field visits, workshops, to understand what are similar concerns and challenges, how have others with similar backgrounds and similar constraints faced those challenges. And I think there's something to be said there for the type of learning that happens through that kind of exchange. One of the things that I think is important to point out is that South-South cooperation in itself really comprises many different types of cooperation. In fact, one of the complaints or rather critiques of South-South cooperation is that it's really not South-South cooperation. There's triangular cooperation. So there are global North-based institutions or organizations that are supporting South-South cooperation work. So whether or not we can call something a quote-unquote pure or authentic South-South cooperation project is questionable, and that's something that I address in my research. What is different in some of the projects that I've come across is really the customizability of participants within South-South cooperation projects and partnerships in terms of what they feel are relevant managerial experiences, relevant strategic bargaining experiences that can be applied in their own practices, as a particular reference to water utilities. In the case of the Global North with the Global South, as I had mentioned with accounting, there's often a sort of set prescription of what is quote-unquote best practice, what needs to be implemented on the ground by practitioners in the Global South. And I think that difference of deciding what is important, deciding what is the best practice, and also in terms of basically implementing that practice on the ground, there's a difference in power in terms of decision-making and identification of that which is important to practitioners. My book examines the rise of South-South cooperation at the urban level. Traditionally, this has been an initiative supported by UN organizations at the national level in agriculture and technology. And my book examines the rise within municipal partnerships within the Global South. I also take it as an opportunity to engage in what I would call a post-colonial critique or lens on what this rise of South-South cooperation means for project evaluation within international development practice. So what exactly does that mean? For example, if one were to evaluate South-South cooperation using an orthodox evaluation or project evaluation practice, say cost-benefit analysis or output-based evaluations, one would find, as I have found, that there isn't really so much of a difference in terms of product or materiality on the ground, in terms of improvements from north-south cooperation projects to south-south cooperation projects. If the pipes are laid with the north-south project, there's really not a difference with the pipes being laid better with a south-south cooperation project. However, there is another compelling reason to look at South-South cooperation from a heterodox evaluation methodology, and that heterodox evaluation lies within post-colonial critique that centers development on the experience of power relations therein, that understands and prioritizes the role of learning within development projects. And this is a key importance or a key finding that I'm writing about in this particular book.